What is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video at hand, and today I want to talk about problems when collecting for the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo is easily one of my favorite game consoles from the 90s, and it is a great console to collect for, play on, have some great memories, have a great time, all that wonderful stuff. But unfortunately, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows when it comes to collecting for Nintendo's 4th gen console. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a list of problems that I think come to my mind when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo. Some of these I have encountered with myself. Other problems on this list I just know are very prevalent and I've heard about, and I feel that they cannot be ignored. So without further ado, let's jump right into this video's topic right after the intro. Alright, so the first problem that comes to my mind when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo are reproduction carts. Now, thankfully, none of my games happen to be reproduction carts, but essentially what a reproduction cart is essentially it is a game that has been reproduced onto a brand new cartridge. It is not the original release. It's got the game's ROM on there, and you can buy it online or locally at said like flea market, maybe a game store or whatever, depending on which game store you're at. And it is a great way to save money if you don't care about having the original authentic release of the game. You just want to play the game on its original hardware. It's a great way to save money. However, it is a massive headache when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendos, because sometimes those reproduction cards can look very similar to the authentic release of said game. So for example, let's say you look for Star Fox for the Super Nintendo, right? And you go on eBay and you click on for the condition for it to be new, like new, and if for whatever reason you see some of those listings where it shows like the cart only, there's a pretty good chance that it could be a reproduction cart, especially when the listing is presented as a brand new listing and it shows just the cartridge only. Now, I'm not saying all like new listings are reproduction carts, but I will say the chances are lower compared to if you, for whatever reason, decide to look up new listings for said Super Nintendo game. Unfortunately, this is also a prevalent problem for the Nintendo 64. I have a video that talks all about problems when it comes to collecting for the Nintendo 64 that I'll be linking somewhere for you guys to check out if that's something that you guys are interested in taking a look at, watching, and checking out. But yeah, one problem that does come to my mind when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo are reproduction carts. Now, another problem that does come to my mind when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo are the prices when it comes to collecting complete in box for such games. As you can see right behind me, I've got complete in box Nintendo 64, Super Famicom, and some 32X right there, right? And I will say, I get the appeal when it comes to collecting complete in box. You get the original packaging, contents, the game. It is just a great thing to experience and own if you are a collector. However, it's not cheap at all when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo, and that goes to a lot of cartridge-based consoles as well. If you are going to be collecting complete in box for Super Nintendo, make sure that you've got some deep pockets on you, because like I said, it is not cheap to collect for. However, when it does come to collecting complete in box for the Super Nintendo, there are some things that you probably should be aware about when it comes to collecting for complete in box for cartridge-based consoles. Is that the boxes are not really built well for durability, with the exception of some such as Sega Genesis, where essentially the boxes will crease and kind of a little bit of get some wear and tear over time when you open and close them and all that good stuff, right? I have a video where it talks about kind of the pros and cons collecting complete in box and my thoughts on whether you should collect complete in box for games in general, that I'll be linking somewhere for you guys to check out, where I do go into a little bit of more detail when it comes to whether you should or should not collect complete in box, along with the pros and cons. But that is something to be aware of when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo, is that it is not a cheap console to collect for if you want to get all your games complete in box. Now, this is a problem that I do have firsthand experience with when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo, are authentic cables for the console itself. Unfortunately, there was a time when I was playing my Super Nintendo, I pulled it out, and part of the red for like the good old composite cables for like white, yellow, red, the red cable kind of like came apart where it was just sort of like the red lining. It wasn't like the cable itself, but you know, I like to keep my stuff in as perfect shape if I can, and as good shape as I can, and that just kind of annoyed me, right? So I decided to go on eBay and look to see if I could get a replacement cable. You can get all kinds of cables all day long for the Super Nintendo, and essentially it was a little bit of a pain trying to find authentic cables, where I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I will say it is a little bit annoying trying to go through all the eBay listings, hopefully trying to find yourself an authentic cable where it's not like a third-party cable that looks very similar to the original cable itself. But I will say, when it comes to finding authentic Super Nintendo cables, that was a little bit of an annoyance. Thankfully, I was able to find some, but I will say that is something that you might run across with if you ever try to find some replacement cables for your Super Nintendo. You're going to find a lot of aftermarket cables that are going to look very similar to the real deal. Of course, I did look for pre-owned and used listings, and of course, I did find the cables that I was looking for. Everything was all good, but I will say that is something you may want to be aware of when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo, is that you might have to dig through a little bit of some aftermarket cables to find the authentic pre-owned ones that came with the actual console from back in the day. Now, one problem that the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo 64 unfortunately share in common are the batteries inside of the cartridges. So with Super Nintendo games that allowed you to have a game save, such as Super Mario World, there's a little battery inside of those cartridges where these batteries would power your game save. They would be the ones that would allow you to, once you would pop that cartridge into your Super Nintendo, you would be able to fire up game save 1, 2, and 3, and you would be able to, you know, go back to where you left off at. Fortunately, since these are getting pretty old now at this point, with the batteries inside and of course the games, these batteries are beginning to die out. Hence, meaning that unfortunately that there is probably a good chance that if the battery was not replaced at some point or another inside of your game is no longer going to be able to hold that save. So every time you pop in Super Mario World, you decide to save, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be starting at the very beginning each and every time. Now, of course, what you can do is look for different game shops and go onto eBay and look for different listings where the seller or the shop has stated perfectly straight, where they've said this game has had the battery replaced and you're all good to go. Of course, you could learn some soldering skills and take apart the cartridge, desolder the battery inside, and then solder it back in. Of course, I'm not going to be doing a tutorial in this video on how you can do that, because there's already people out there that talk about just that. Plus, I'm not really good at soldering myself, so I would be a terrible person to teach you guys on how to desolder and solder back in those batteries. But that is something that you should be aware about when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo, is that those batteries inside might be an issue, and you may want to be aware of that whenever you decide to pick up some Super Nintendo games. Another problem that the Super Nintendo has, which I believe can be quite a bit of an eyesore, is the yellowing on the console and the cartridges themselves. Unfortunately, the plastic on the carts and the Super Nintendo console itself are very susceptible to yellowing. Essentially, yellowing can be caused by sunlight exposure, and it's not really fun to look at, and it's quite a bit of an eyesore when it comes to looking at your cartridges and your console itself. Of course, there are plenty of remedies on how you can do that online. Again, one more thing that I won't be talking about in this video because, as stated from before, there are people that talk about and show videos doing just that, how to remove the yellowing from your Super Nintendo and your cartridges. But yeah, that is a problem that you can face when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo. It's not fun. It's a bit of an eyesore. I'm very fortunate with my Super Nintendo. It doesn't have any yellowing when I first picked it up. When I got my Super Nintendo, I was able to get it for free, and I got like almost $500 worth of stuff, and I was very surprised that everything was in pretty good shape. If you guys want me to make a video where I talk about my entire story of how I got $500 worth of Super Nintendo stuff for free, please let me know, because I am debating if this is a topic that I should talk about on the channel. So if that is something you want me to talk about, please let me know, because I'd love to make a video about it. But yeah, I was very surprised that everything was in good shape. But yeah, that is a problem that you can come across with when it comes to collecting for the Super Nintendo, is the yellowing on the cartridges. Just a little something to be aware about when you are collecting for the good old Super Nintendo. Alright, and that is going to conclude my video for problems when collecting for the Super Nintendo. What do you guys think? Did you have any of these problems that you've encountered at some point or another? What are some problems that you guys consider to be relatively common for the Super Nintendo? Did you find the video to be entertaining, informative, all that good stuff? Feel free to comment in the comment section down below. I would love to hear from you guys. Give this video a like if you did find it entertaining and informative, because it will help boost it up into the YouTube algorithm so more viewers such as you can find videos just like this. Of course, please do consider subscribing, because I post a lot of content when it comes to game collecting tips, game-related subjects. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, please do consider subscribing. But if you're going to subscribe, don't forget to hit that bell notification button, so that way you will be notified when I upload a video just like this. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.